Thank you for joining me today for Fireside Fire Drill. Listen, are you like me? It seems like yesterday was last Friday. You know, there's like hardly, it reminds me of the bologna sandwich I ate in jail in DC. It was about that thin. There's a bologna sandwich between every Friday. There's not a week. It's like every Friday comes one right after the other with just thin bologna between. Time has lost all relevance. I don't know. It's just weird what's happening. I wonder if I'm the only one that feels that way. And oh, we've had since July 4 million people watching us. Isn't that great? Oh yeah, now it's time for good news. Here we go. Yesterday, a federal judge granted a request to temporarily block new operational changes within the United States Postal Service and take things back to how it was before Postmaster General DeJoy, a big Trump donor, took his job. So great. All his changes, DeJoy's changes, have threatened to delay mail delivery ahead of the election, which is predicted to bring in a record number of mail-in ballots. Judge Stanley Bastion, love that man, found the agency was, quote, involved in a politically motivated attack on the efficiency, which would irreparably harm the state's ability to administer the 2020 general election. During a court hearing, Bastion said, that's the judge, he would be issuing a nationwide injunction against the USPS, which comes after several Democratic state attorneys general sued the Postal Service last month, claiming Postmaster General DeJoy broke the law when he administered several sweeping policy changes that disrupted mail delivery nationally. Thank you, Judge Bastion. Second piece of good news from the other side of the world, on the fight against plastics, China, the biggest producer of plastic waste in the world, has launched a plan to dramatically cut plastic production and use over the next 5 years. The ban on the production and sale of disposable foam plastic tableware, straws, and other single-use items will go into effect before the end of this year. The ban on non-biodegradable plastic bags will take effect in some regions almost immediately, expanding nationwide by 2025. At that time, hotels must also stop providing free single-use plastic products, while couriers must stop using non-biodegradable plastic packaging. Yes. You know, well, I wish this was going to all happen really quick before 5 years. It's such a big step in the right direction by a really big country. And we need more leaders to issue meaningful plastic ban policies. Go China. Now, before we get started, I wanted to remind you all about my brand new book. Came out last week. It's doing really well. It's called What Can I Do? My Path from Climate Despair to Action. And people seem to be really loving it. I write about how Fire Drill Friday got started. I have a lot of really personal things in it. All the amazing things that I learned, and what people really love and what I love is at the end of each chapter, there's a section called What Can I Do? That gives very easy, practical, user-friendly things that you can do to make a difference. I hope you'll grab a copy or two. You can go to www.janefonda.com/whatcanido to order now. Okay. Together with Ben Cohen and Jerry Greenfield of Ben & Jerry's Ice Cream, we're going to discuss the intersection between the climate crisis, voting rights, and the military. The military, you say? That's right. Most people don't really understand what the military has to do with the climate crisis. And to tell you the truth, neither did I before last fall. I learned what you're going to hear today last fall, and it kind of realigned my brain in all sorts of ways. It's really interesting. One of the most shocking things I learned was that the military, dig this, the military is exempt from most environmental regulations, meaning it can dump toxic chemicals and burn discarded gear without addressing the consequences to the environment or to the people who live on or near the bases. civilians in countries like Iraq. Do you know what super site funds are? Super fund sites. Have you heard of that? Do you know what super fund sites are? They're sites that are designated as so dangerously toxic that they can only be cleaned up by the federal government. Well, 141 of the Superfund cleanup sites are on or near military bases. I will bet that there are studies that show that American military personnel suffer higher rates than normal cases of cancer. Instead of sending them to war for oil, we should be getting rid of these hazards. That's the way to support our troops. Here's another thing. All the wars that we've fought over the last 40 years and more, in fact, have been fought over oil. I mean, think about that. If we don't leave the fossil fuel era behind and fast, wars in the future are going to be about scarce water, scarce food, scarce habitable land, right? And here's another thing that I didn't know before last fall. The Pentagon is the biggest industrial user of fossil fuels in the world, which means the US is responsible for the biggest release of greenhouse gases. Okay, so let's take a look at the military budget. It was Phyllis Bennis, a policy analyst at the Institute for Policy Studies. Now I have to be able to see what I'm saying. I can't get rid of this. I need to get rid of this screen so I can see what I'm doing. It's not moving. Okay, hold on. Don't stay with me. Don't leave. Okay, here we go. So you see this graph? Look at this graph. Can you believe this? Phyllis Bennis, a policy analyst at the Institute for Policy Studies, who was also an expert in all things military, she revealed to me the enormity of our military boondoggle. For instance, as of 2019, our annual military budget was $716 billion a year. See, we're the blue column that you can see that's our military budget, and you can see that it's bigger than the next 7 countries combined, which means Russia, China, India, Saudi Arabia, and the 6 next biggest countries that have militaries. And then the green column next to that, you see that over to the side, that's all the rest of the world, 139 countries. Okay, now here is a graph showing the federal discretionary spending for 2019. 53 cents of every discretionary federal dollar of our tax money goes directly to the military. And if you add in things like Homeland Security and ICE and the other parts of the militarized forces here at home, I guess that would include federal support for militarizing the police. In that case, it's more like 64 cents. 64 cents out of every dollar goes to the military. The military budget is the big blue section you see of the pie chart. Doesn't leave much room for anything else, does it? Like education. See that small orange section? And healthcare, the small purple section next to education. There's nothing left over for the things that really matter. There's a national priorities website that we've put in. It's a link that we've put into the chat room. And you should really check this out. This link shows you how many kids you could educate at Head Start for the same amount of money we're giving the Pentagon, or how many adults could get health care, or how many homes could be retrofitted to be energy efficient. You can even find out those same numbers, like how many kids and how much health care and how many retrofitted homes right in your community if we didn't spend so much on the Pentagon. Okay, so that's it. Go to that link and check it out. And according to Phyllis Bennis, we could cut $600 billion from the military budget. What we would have left would be the equivalent of what Russia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and North Korea spend combined on the military. The US has 800 military bases all over the world. We're the only country that has bases all over the world. Phyllis says that Russia has only 7 bases, and other countries have only 1 aircraft carrier each. China has 2. We have 11 aircraft carriers, which can cost up to $30 billion each. Really? Really? Does all this money spent on the military, on defense, really make us safer? We're going to talk about that. Martin Luther King once said, quote, "A nation that continues year after year to spend more money on military defense than on programs of social uplift is approaching spiritual death." And I would add, planetary death. Last winter, Phyllis told us that oftentimes when one advocates for cutting the military budget, you're accused of not supporting the troops. But the truth is, she told us, very little of this military budget goes to support the troops. In 2017, she learned, Phyllis did, that 23,000 soldiers and sailors, active duty soldiers and sailors, were making so little money that they qualify for food stamps. Apparently, half the military budget goes to military corporations and the CEOs of those corporations, who are among the best paid of all corporate executives. Phyllis told us that the average salary for the CEOs of the top 20 military corporations was $20 million a year. $20 million a year for CEOs, while active duty service people qualify for food stamps. The country is facing multiple threats, none of which can be solved by the military. Can an aircraft carrier save our democracy from Russia's invading our electoral system in order to rig it to their liking? Can a military base, or even 10 of them, save us from white supremacy or police violence? Can we bomb our way out of the climate crisis? Even looking at Washington's current wars, dozens of military as well as political leaders have admitted that there's no military solution to terrorism. Now, you out here watching this, you know there are many, many millions of people in this country like you who care about the climate crisis and equality and having a reliable, safe voting system and a strong, well-prepared healthcare system that's available to everybody. Let's make it our job to do all we can to get all those millions to take the next step and to become thermostat citizens, people who are prepared to fight to change the political climate so that our priorities stop being ass backwards. Can we do this together? I think we can. You bet. Okay. Now, Ben and Jerry, Ben Cohen and Jerry Greenfield. They were both born in 1951 in New York. And in 1978, at age 27, were co-founders of the ice cream company Ben and Jerry's. Besides making totally yummy ice cream, their mission-driven corporation was maybe the first time a business was used as a force for social justice. They wrote a best-selling book entitled Ben and Jerry's Double Dip: How to Run a Values-Led Business and Make Money Too. It was a guidebook for those wanting to do the same. Jerry is president of Ben and Jerry's Foundation, which supports grassroots activism, and both men are longtime activists against war and militarism. I'm so happy that you're both here. Thank you for taking time to join us. Welcome.
Good to be here, Jane. Thanks for the opportunity to take out my red winter jacket for the first time this year.
You're so good. Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, Jane.
Yeah.
Great to be here. Thanks.
Hi, it's so good to see you. Let me start with you, Ben. Last winter, because you know Ben and Jerry came to DC and participated in Fire Drill Fridays in DC, and we participated that particular Friday. We had a huge march to the White House, and we sat in front of the gates of the White House. They wouldn't arrest us. I think they were afraid of what would happen if Ben and Jerry got arrested, that it would like blow up the world or something. We couldn't get ourselves arrested. Anyway, at that time, Ben, you made a really important point. You said money spent improving the living conditions here at home is national security spending. Would you explain what you meant there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what is it that makes people feel secure? It's having a decent job. It's having decent housing. It's having decent health care. It's having decent childcare for their kids. And the reality is that we could be spending our money on providing all those things and still have the most powerful military force in the world if we just lopped off 50% of it. We would still be the most powerful force in the world. It's just incredible how much $1 billion will buy outside of the Pentagon system. We have the latest new weapon system is the F-35 fighter jet. That weapon system over the course of its life costs $1.5 trillion. I mean, it doesn't buy a whole lot in the military, but you take it out of the military into the civilian world, and what do you know? You find that $10 billion a year would eliminate homelessness. I mean, we're spending 1.5 trillion for one weapon system, and for what's the fraction of 10 billion out of 1.5 trillion? I don't know. It ain't a whole lot, but that's what we could have. Wow. Real security that matters to our everyday lives. I mean, you think about they call it the Defense Department. That would lead one to believe that the purpose of it is to defend our country from somebody trying to invade us. I mean, the US is the most powerful military force in the world, and we can't even occupy a little country like Iraq. How's some other country going to come in and occupy the US? Nobody's trying to do it. Nobody wants to. Who would want that job?
Yeah, right. Thank you, Ben. What are the best tactics to get the government to cut the military budget? Jerry, what do you think?
Ben's been working on that for many, many years. And it's very challenging because our Congress people are essentially bought and sold in their elections by campaign contributions. And a lot of the money is coming from the big industries, whether it's the military contractors, whether it's fossil fuel companies. And so long as we have big money in politics, it is very challenging to change that system. I think that for so many issues, whether it's the military budget, whether it's fossil fuels, whether it's the environment, a lot of it comes down to the influence of big money in politics and elections.
Yeah, and I think that the way to get big money out of politics is to work from the bottom up. That's really how the Republicans gain control of the country and how the Republicans are working on voter suppression is that they started on these really down ballot local elections, local municipalities and in states. And then once you get control of the state legislature, you're able to then determine the voter registration laws, and you're able to suppress the vote. So we need to do the same thing. We need to start at the down ballot, at the local level, and then at the state level. And that's how we're gonna take back control. And the way you do it is that you tell those people that are running for local offices that want your vote, and you say, well, if you agree not to take big money donations, I'll vote for you. But that's a condition of my vote.
Fabulous. Heard, understood, will do. And I know that all the people watching agree. Thank you. And by the way, you know, one of the things, even with a cut military budget, one of the things that they should be using that budget for is to help vets transition to a civilian life and to provide the long-term resources needed for treating physical and psychological trauma. You know, that's another thing that would make us safer in this country if we took care of our warriors, right?
I think it's just a tragedy the way we treat our veterans, our returning veterans from wars. You know, these are people who are out there protecting our country. And, you know, over time, things have really changed. I think the kinds of wars that we're fighting have changed, the kind of combat. I mean, we now have an all volunteer force, which is something that's new. We have women in combat, which is something that's new. That we have sexual trauma involved with them. We have people undergoing multiple deployments now. The nature of the wars that they're fighting are changing. I mean, it used to be that there were conventional conflicts. Now you have people that are, you know, in conflicts with, you know, Ben mentioned countries like Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan. So there are multiple agendas from all of those enemies. And when our soldiers come back, they have different issues now. They have health issues, they have mental health issues, which are very, very difficult, from PTSD. The homelessness of veterans is an enormous problem. The care they get from VA, the quality of service really varies. Sometimes there's long wait times. You have substance abuse issues. This should be one of the top priorities. We always talk how important it is for our people in the armed forces, and yet we don't treat them that way.
Yeah.
You know, what happens, a lot of what the reason for this is what's known as the revolving door. You have these high-level officers in the Pentagon that are in charge of contracts with defense contractors. And essentially, the defense contractor lets them know that, hey, give me a good contract, don't watch it too close, and when you retire, there's going to be a nice cushy job for you over here as an executive, as a governmental liaison, as a member of our board, and you're going to make 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times as much as you made. And so what happens is that the money that's supposed to end up going to our troops gets transferred out of the budget for the troops and goes into buying more expensive, high-tech weapons that never work.
I think Biden is a pro-troop kind of guy in the real sense of the word that we're talking about. Well, we have to make sure that he is, but I think he is. Thank you for what you've said. Do you advocate for people to divest from investments they have in the military machine, and make sure that all institutions that they're connected to, universities, churches, cities, money management funds, that they're divested from the military. This means also from the suppliers of the military, the Lockheed Martin, Boeing, Northrop Grumman, General Dynamics. Don't you think people should divest from those things?
Totally. You gotta put your money where your values are. You need to invest in those things that you believe in. You don't want to be talking peace and real security out of one side of your mouth, and then out of the other side, taking the money out of your wallet and investing in tools of death and destruction. And, you know, I'm amazed dealing with, you know, like these high level financial guys that, you know, I never thought I'd end up dealing with high level financial guys, but Ben and Jerry's got to be a big business. We ended up doing that. And you talk to these Wall Street guys and these money managers, and it's all just follow the leader, follow the crowd, conventional wisdom. You need to have a diversified portfolio. You need to have some money in defense. And yeah, they've got a good track record. But I mean, the reality is when you tell your financial advisor, whoever's investing money for you, that I don't want any money put into defense contractors, sure enough, they find other places to put it, and you do just as well.
Just as well.
Just as well, if not better.
Yeah.
Well, you know, I think what you mentioned, Jane, about institutions is so critical. You know, it's important for people to do it as individuals, but when you think about money invested by colleges or any of these big things, you see students who get together and force their administrations to get out of things like fossil fuel companies or military contractors. And there's much bigger impact when people can get together and get these big institutional investors to make changes in what they do.
Thank you. Great idea. Ben, you've been a vocal opponent against big money in politics, and I'm with you on that 100%. When the gaggle of multi-billionaires led by the Koch brothers created Citizens United, you know, which made it legal for vast sums of dark, untraceable money to be given to political campaigns, it essentially warped our elections almost beyond recognition. How do we stop this and get back to democracy?
Yeah, I think the key is voting. I mean, you know, it was interesting. I was one of Bernie's co-chairs during the primary. And, you know, there were all these young people that were coming out to the rallies and that believed in what Bernie was saying. But then when it came time to vote, you know, they just didn't show up. You know, there was something better to do that night. They had a hot date. You know, I was suggesting they bring their date to the polls and do it in the booth, but, you know, that didn't work apparently. And, you know, you need to make your vote count. You know, this time there's, you know, maybe some people aren't that excited about the guy at the top of the ticket, but there's guys that you can get excited about at the bottom of the ticket. And the thing that we all really need to get really excited about is removing the current occupant of the White House. And, you know, if the statistics are that younger people just tend not to vote. I mean, I was a younger person once. I wasn't a big voter. But so for all of us who know younger people, we need to make sure they get their butts out to the polls.
We need to help them understand that voting is choosing your opponent. You know, who would I rather have to fight against to get the good things to happen? Okay. And clearly, this is what Annie Leonard said to me. Wouldn't you rather push a centrist than fight a fascist? Of course you would.
Exactly.
Well, Jane, one of the things you and Ben mentioned before was about voter suppression. Ben's talking about how critical it is for people to vote. I think we also have to recognize that there's a lot of activity in making it more difficult for some people to vote. I mean, in the United States, we should be the paragon of democracy. We should be encouraging as many people to vote as possible. And yet, there's so many different ways that people's votes are being suppressed, whether it's in making it difficult to register to vote, whether it's making it long lines once you actually get to vote, voter intimidation, voting machine malfunctions, restricting who can register. There's a big fight going on there. And I think people need to recognize we have to be involved in that too, that making it easier for everybody to vote. I mean, if you look at the people that are getting suppressed, if you want to call it that, it actively disadvantages minority communities, young people, students, and they generally lean Democratic. And so we need to be actively getting it so that everybody can vote. You look at some of the restrictions on voting. You can't register online, or you make it hard to have somebody to have a government ID. I heard that in Texas, they won't accept a student ID, but they will accept a handgun license to affirm your identity. So, it's things like that we really need to be challenging.
Yeah, I was amazed. I mean, it didn't really register for me until somebody, kind of took me by the hand and spelled it out. Imagine that you're a low income hourly employee, you don't have a car, and they've shut down the local DMV where you could go and get one of these strict IDs that they're requiring now to vote. And so you need to take unpaid time off work, catch the bus, go to the other end of town, stand on this line, catch the bus back, come back. I mean, you've lost at least half a day of work. And that's just to get the voter ID. And then on election day, you got to do the same thing again. It's an incredible hardship. And for somebody who doesn't have much money and is barely trying to pay the rent, I mean, what kind of decision do you make? Do I pay the rent, or do I go and, take the half day off work?
Well, Ben, I got to tell you, the ACLU is doing some great work on this, not just on litigation, but they have information, what to do if you end up going to the polls and you run into some problems there. I think that would be a great resource for people to check with the ACLU.
We have to clean this whole voter problem up after we get the Democrat elected, right? And to do that, we vote early. You can't vote at the same time in every state. Find out what your state allows in terms of early voting. Make a plan. If you're in a wheelchair and it's hard to get to a precinct or a mailbox, get someone to carry your vote to a secure drop box or to the postal service. I think that after the good news I announced today, that we can have more confidence in the Postal Service getting our ballots where they need to be. But vote early and make a plan to vote for sure. And even if you live in a state like I do in California, where it's a blue state, But you still have to vote, because who are the board of supervisors, the city councils? Do you know how important city councils are? If we had a better city council in Los Angeles, we could pass a Green New Deal in a really meaningful one in Los Angeles. So these, as I think Ben said earlier, the down ballot tickets are so important for your everyday life, for the future of voting, and for the climate crisis. So no matter where you live, please vote. Let me ask you both something. What are your thoughts on the call to defund the police?
I think, I first heard that and I said, wow, that's pretty radical. And then I saw this, this social media post that said, I thought defunding the police was radical until I realized they've been defunding education for the past 25 years. Right. I mean, it's not talking about totally abolishing the police. It's talking about taking some of the money that's currently going to the police and putting it into the root causes that lead to crime, putting it into housing, putting it into education. And it's talking about revisioning public safety, that it's not always about calling up a guy who shows up with a gun who's licensed to kill. It's about calling somebody who can help when you're, if a neighbor is making too much noise, calling someone who can help settle a domestic dispute, calling someone who can help investigate a traffic accident. Why do you need somebody who's licensed to kill to investigate a traffic accident? And I think another big part of this idea of defunding the police is that I think it's since 2011, there have been several $1 billion worth of excess military equipment that the Pentagon just gives to police departments. And, that's absurd. I mean, that's making our own police department, the people that are supposed to protect and serve, it's making them into a militarized occupying force, complete with up-armored, troop carriers, complete with military grade weapons. It's absurd. I mean, they talk a good line about, community policing, the cop is your friend. And then the guy comes in showing up like Rambo. I mean, no, he don't seem like your friend.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And oh, by the way, I just want to remind people that there's a real need for poll watchers, people who sign up and volunteer to be at the polls, making sure that everything is above board, that everything works, that people know what they're supposed to do and how to vote and all that. President Obama issued a call about a month ago. They need like 250,000 poll watchers. So do it if you have time and the ability to do it. It's a good way to volunteer.
Because Lord knows the other side is coming in with their poll watchers. And I've seen some things that are saying, hey, get your gun and show up to the poll. That's intimidation.
That was stopped. It was stopped for a while because it was so bad and so intimidating. Uniformed people would come in with weapons to so-called make sure things were going okay in the polling precincts. And it was so intimidating. They stopped it. And then I think it was this year or last year, they brought it back. And they're going to be doing that this year. That's why we need people on our side with our kind of thinking to be there to make sure that bad things don't happen. Okay. Thank you for listening to that. Listen, I know you both are involved in stopping voter suppression. What's the most important work being done right now in this regard? And what do you suggest our audiences do to help stop it?
I think the ACLU is one of the best organizations that's working on it, and I'd get in touch with them. There's a great organization called Represent.us that's doing more grassroots work on stopping voter suppression. Those would be two of the big things I would do.
Yeah, I think a lot of it, as Ben said, is at the state level. The other thing you can do is get in touch with your senator. There's an act called the Voting Rights Advancement Act that you can encourage your senator to support. It's a really big issue, particularly when you think about the foundation of our democracy is based on the democracy representing everyone. And if you start making it so that certain groups of people can't vote, our country would no longer represent everybody. It would represent, to a certain degree, what it represents now, which are wealthy people and corporations. And if you want to see that changed, you got to change who's voting.
I just saw in the chat room there was reference to Stacey Abrams' group, which has been focused on ending voter suppression.
Yeah, it's called Fair Fight.
Yeah.
So checking that out would be a good idea. Thanks for that. How does combating the climate crisis equal more security? How are the two connected?
Well, I think that, the climate crisis, climate change, before Trump was considered by the Pentagon to be the major national security threat. And then once Trump was in, of course, you couldn't talk about climate change, and that was stricken. But the reality is that the climate crisis is causing all this dislocation as a result of droughts and famine and floods and sea rise. And that's putting tremendous pressure on the countries around the world. And that is causing conflicts. There's been all this documentation that the current wars have been about oil. The future wars are going to be about access to potable water. And it's all climate related. If, you think about the Green New Deal, one of the ways it pays for itself is by negating the need to spend so much money on the Pentagon because there'd be so much less wars fought to begin with.
Yeah, and I think we have to realize that it's important to do things individually, whether it's washing your clothes in cold water or changing your lifestyle a little bit, but that's not really going to get us to where we need to go. What we need are policy changes at the governmental level and at the international level to make things happen. We're not going to shop our way out of the crisis.
Couldn't agree more. Thanks for that. I know that there must be a lot of audience questions, and I have more too, but let's have some questions from the audience, Maddie.
Great. So we've gotten a few of these, but from Danny on Zoom, how did the two of you first meet and come up with the idea for Ben and Jerry's ice cream?
Jerry and I were in the same 7th grade gym class. We were the two slowest, fattest kids running around the track. So there'd be everybody running around the track, and half a lap behind is me and Jerry. And you tend to make good friends with whoever else you can find back there at the back of the pack. That's how we met.
From Lynn on Twitter, have you both always been activists? And how did your activism start?
With your mothers, I bet.
For me, Ben and I grew up in the 50s and 60s, and when I went away to college, there was a lot of social movements going on. There was the women's movement, there was the civil rights movement, and during those years, I became much more active. How about for you, Ben?
I became more active as Ben and Jerry's got to be a larger business, and you know, news media was always calling us up to comment on this or that, and we were being invited to speak at different places, and I felt like, wow, if they want to hear from me, I'm going to tell them what I really think. and I'm going to tell them what I think about social issues and political issues. I'm going to use that power to try to create systemic change. And then the other thing that happened was that, you know, Ben and Jerry's continued to get larger and larger, and eventually it was a $300 million company, and I started getting a vague idea as to how much a billion really is. 1 billion. I mean, I was thinking about all the freaking ice cream that we were pumping out to get to 300 million. And I realized that, well, a billion is just 3 times that. And believe me, it is a shitload. And, so when you think about the Pentagon budget is 700 billion plus, I started to understand how much money they're actually shoving out at this bureaucracy, which happens to be the only department in the federal government that can't pass an audit. I mean, the amount of corruption and waste and mismanagement in the Pentagon is staggering. I mean, what did I say? It would cost $10 billion to end homelessness. I mean, that doesn't even cover the waste and mismanagement in the Pentagon. Yeah, that's kind of what did it for me.
I just realized that we have something in common that we've never talked about. Because in the 70s, my husband, Tom Hayden, and I had started a statewide organization. I mean, this is a huge state, so it required a lot of money. It was called the Campaign for Economic Democracy, and it was during a recession. And I read about, remember the guy that oh God, I can't remember his name now. He used to have people at the airport with these despicable signs, feed Jane Fonda to the whales, and I don't know, awful things. And he made his money through a business. So Tom and I thought, we got to start a business. We thought about a lot. I started the workout to fund the Campaign for Economic Democracy. So I had one of these kind of good businesses too.
All right. Well, let us do good business together, Jane.
Yeah.
I think oh, sorry.
Maddie, what's another question? I'm talking too much.
All right. This is a question that we have been getting nonstop. People are really excited to know. For both of you, Ben and Jerry, if you could create a pint of Fire Drill Fridays ice cream, what would be in it?
Well, I think it would have to be a hot cinnamon base, kind of like it would taste like an atomic fireball. And I think maybe it would have those little heart-shaped hot cinnamon candies in it, and some chocolate chunks, because if you want to make any kind of decent ice cream flavor, you have to stick some chocolate chunks in it.
That's why yours are so good. Well, I like that idea. I don't know if Unilever.
Would your pint be the same?
What?
Would Jerry make the same pint?
I would have to defer to Ben. Ben early on created all the flavors for Ben and Jerry's. And many people don't know this, but I have never come up with any flavor in the entire 42-year history of Ben and
Oh, you
Jerry.
should have kept that a secret, Jerry.
Well, the other secret was that I also don't really have a sense of taste. So
Oh, you're kidding.
it's true. We used to really keep it a secret because we were afraid it would be bad for business, but now we decided to let it out. So I have, it's not like I have absolutely no sense of taste, but I have a very, very slight sense of taste. So in order for me to taste something, it needs to be really highly flavored. And that's why our ice cream is so highly flavored. And that's why it has all these chunks, so that you can have a contrast between the smooth, creamy ice cream and the crunchy chunk. Because as we all know, when you have a sensory deficit, your other senses get heightened. And so I happen to have a very heightened sense of mouth feel. And, if you want to talk texture and food, talk to me.
You're the one. That is absolutely fascinating. So you would put this together, and then Ben was your taster?
Ben would come up with the flavors. I would
And
make
Jerry was the taster.
I would give it to Ben. He would say, I like it, but I can't tell what flavor it is. Can you put more flavor in? And can you put more chunks in? And when you finally made a flavor that Ben liked, you knew it was good.
Now we know your secret. Wow.
Well, there's other examples of that. I remember reading in elementary school about Jim Thorpe. He was like a runner, an athlete. And I think that he had a couple of toes burnt off in some fire, and he overcame that handicap. So I'm a little like Jim.
How about another question, Maddie? Do we have a few more minutes?
Yeah, we can ask a few more questions. Another ice cream related one. What's your favorite ice cream flavor, each of you?
For the longest time, my favorite ice cream flavor was Cherry Garcia. And then I wandered, and I wandered into the realm of Chunky Monkey and Chubby Hubby, chocolate covered peanut butter filled pretzels and vanilla malt ice cream with a swirl. And then salted caramel. I thought that was really good. But the other night I had some Cherry Garcia, and I'm thinking of going back to my old flame.
So I always eat Americone Dream, which is vanilla ice cream with a caramel swirl and fudge covered pieces of waffle cones. But the interesting thing is that my all-time favorite flavor, coconut almond fudge chip, is in the flavor graveyard. And I think Ben's favorite all-time flavor, mocha walnut, is also in the flavor graveyard. Both of our favorite flavors have been discontinued because apparently our tastes are not in line with the rest of the public.
It's nice to know. I had never really thought about it before now, but when we die and go to heaven, we're going to meet all our old favorite flavors there. It's going to be great.
Oh, I love it. Well, it's good going out with laughter in the midst of everything. I love you both so much, and I'm so grateful that you joined us today. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. I'm really yearning for ice cream right now, I can tell you that.
Thank you for being our leader, Jane.
Huh?
Thank you for being our leader. We are here for you. We are here behind you. You
and
tell us
I'm behind and with you by our powers combined. And I appreciate you helping us understand the connection between the military and the climate crisis and democracy. I want to make sure that people visit firedrillfridays.com/how-to-help. firedrillfridays.com/how-to-help. That's how you can follow through on the calls to action that we put out. We have thousands of volunteers and they're working hard, getting out the vote, registering people who've been purged from the polls. If you have signed up to volunteer and you haven't heard from us yet, stay patient. There's just a whole lot of people and we have to get in touch with them. But people are really enjoying the camaraderie between the volunteers and the groups that they're parts of. So keep them coming. We really need your help. And before we wrap up, I want to give a quick volunteer update. Our electoral organizing program is really hard at work. And you know, those of you who speak Spanish, we really need you. We need to register people in the Latinx community. Politically, in terms of the election, the Latinx vote is really, really important, but also Latinx people care more about the climate than any other demographic. That's what the studies show. So getting them involved is really important and registered to vote. We have about 500 active members on our texting team, and we've contacted 1 million voters in key swing states. So the way you join for that is firedrillfridays.com/volunteer to join a volunteer team right now. Thanks again. Thank you, Ben and Jerry. Thanks all of you at home for joining. See you next week. I want to give you a real quick update. I've already done that. I'm so thinking about ice cream that I got a little confused. We've already talked about volunteering. So see you next week. Stay safe, keep a distance, wear your masks. I'm so grateful to you. Stay safe. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Jane. Bye-bye.